Hi, this is Tisch Aitken, and it is Friday, October 10th, 2025. We have a big week ahead of us because Pluto, the planet of death and regeneration, death and rebirth and transformation and empowerment, stations direct on October 13th at 1 degree and 22 minutes of the fixed air sign of Aquarius. We feel that energy 5 days before and 5 days afterwards. And Pluto is a dwarf planet, but it packs a punch. And whenever an outer planet either stations retrograde or direct, it's really enhancing the qualities of that outer planet, whatever that planet may be. With Pluto, this involves major departures and endings, as Pluto rules the sign of Scorpio in modern astrology and is associated with death and release and letting go in some way. It's also connected with power and empowerment. It can deal with joint money and mutual assets and other people's money and big money. And it can deal with emotional intensity. And there will be major departures with this energy. This can also involve major issues with people in power. And with our own lives, we're figuring out this is the first time in our lifetime that Pluto has stationed retrograde in harmony with the planet Uranus, because Uranus is trining Pluto. It's also in an air sign. It's in the sign of Gemini, and Uranus is the modern ruler of the sign of Aquarius. And they're going to make an exact trine next July. On the 18th of July, there's actually going to be a minor triangle, a magic triangle that involves Uranus and Pluto, but Neptune will be in the center, will be the midpoint of both, and will be bringing a lot of manifesting opportunity and a lot of harmony and innovation and infinite possibility. But right now, there's very heavy energy, and as we get to the end of the month, we're going to have a lot of planets transiting in water signs. We'll be in Scorpio season by the end of the month, and Neptune, which is the modern ruler of Pisces, will return to the sign of Pisces on October 22nd, and that will add more of this more flow, more emotional flooding, more release. It's going to be at the last sign of the Zodiac, which is about letting go and about finalizing things in your life, and people that are hanging on by a thread and situations are going to be ending with this energy. Neptune will not retrograde beyond that degree, and it will remain there through January 26th. Saturn is in Pisces, and it will station direct on Thanksgiving Day in the United States on November 27th. And it will station at 25 degrees of the mutable water sign of Pisces. That's where Venus stationed direct earlier in the year, because we had Venus retrograde in Pisces. A lot of Mercury retrograded in Pisces earlier in the year, and we've dealt with eclipses in the Virgo Pisces axis. And there have been there has been a lot of sudden loss, and that also is Saturn at the last degrees of Pisces. We had a full moon earlier in the week that officially ended eclipse season. It was in the sign of Aries. And the last eclipse, the second eclipse we had in September, opposed Saturn in Pisces at the last degrees. That's a finality, the last sign of the Zodiac, karmic clearing. And again, in Pisces, if people are really ill or hanging on, really just such fragile and vulnerable state, they're going to be passing over. Situations are dissolving. things are ending. And with this Pluto station, there will also be major departures. And with all of the water that we have this month, because we already have Mercury, the planet of learning and communication and information, traveling in the fixed water sign of Scorpio, and it will through October 29th. And Mars, which rules Scorpio in ancient astrology rather, Mars is transiting in its domicile because it does rule Scorpio. It's going to be there through November 4th, and they're traveling closely together. Mars gives us the fight, even though as we get to the end of the month, many of us may feel like we're floating or drowning in the energy. It could feel hard to navigate, and there are things that are very unclear. At current time, Neptune is still at the world point at 0 degrees of the cardinal fire sign of Aries. And that's very pervasive energy, which is a thick fog, which is hard to cut. And you could feel really lost in it. I know some people that are doing really creative projects and with all this water, and by the end of the month there will be grand trines in water, meaning that that's a flow of energy when 3 points form a triangle and each is 120 degrees apart. Mercury in Scorpio will be trining Neptune in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces, helping to construct your thoughts into a dream. And then they'll be both trining Jupiter in Cancer, which is exalted, and Neptune is in its rulership in Pisces. That could be very magnetizing energy if you work with it that way and work with your emotions, listen to your intuition. As much as things can seem really hard to distinguish and navigate, it's also incredibly intuitive energy. And many are telling me that they're having very strong informative dreams, whether they're psychic or just revealing of something that's going on, and that energy will be very prominent. And with Neptune at the world point, and then when it returns to the last degree of the Zodiac, where it will be through January 26th, and Saturn will remain in Pisces through February 13th. And so with this said, we're dealing with heavy stuff right now. We had a full moon in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, again saying to have courage during a very emotional month, and one where things can seem very confusing and just bleak. You know, it's a difficult time. And then Chiron met up with Eris, the goddess of discord, and that was the second time they met up. Yesterday on October 9th, they met up at 25 degrees of Aries. They met up earlier in May, and they will meet up a third time next March. And that's emphasizing the full moon in Aries energy too, because Eris is the goddess of discord. She began the Trojan War because she, threw an apple out and said, "Who's the fairest of them all?" And the goddesses all got into a fight, and she will upset the apple cart to get things, to bring attention, kind of like Uranus, but she is Mars' sister, and so she's got a very aggressive Mars type energy, and she's up for a fight. And Chiron is the wounded healer, and in the sign of Aries, it's about vulnerability around ego and identity and self. And it's just really can be very painful to face who you are. Yet that full moon in Aries, whose ruler is Mars, which is currently transiting in its home sign. And remember, this year we began with Mars retrograde in its fall position. Took a long time to clear its shadow, and has made 3 oppositions to Pluto since last November. Okay, so it made a lot of challenging influences. At least it's in its domicile now, giving you the courage. Mars in Scorpio is very powerful. It's relentless when it's after something, and it will not give up. So don't give up, even though things may feel really difficult. And Venus, which is the planet of relationships, is in the last degrees of Virgo. It made a difficult quincunx to Chiron in Aries, meaning they were in conjunct. That's an aspect of discomfort. And that occurred yesterday. And Venus will oppose Saturn on October 11th at 7:11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And with the Pluto station, which in Aquarius can be also, a lot of us are experiencing technological difficulties because Aquarius does rule technology, among other things. It's a big awakening aspect too with Pluto in Aquarius. But with that energy, there are likely going to be breakups this weekend too, because Pluto ends things and Venus is opposing Saturn. Saturn also will end something that is not for your maturation and for your growth. So Venus opposes Saturn. And then on the 13th of October, which is the day that Pluto stations, and remember again, we're feeling that energy 5 days before and 5 days afterwards. So we started feeling it intensely yesterday. And we're going to feel it beyond the 13th. We'll feel it 5 days after. And on that day, Venus enters the cardinal air sign of Libra, which it loves to be in. It rules the sign of Libra. And that occurs at 5:19 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And Venus will transit in Libra through November 6th. And that adds a little bit of air. Venus is in its dignity. It's very much about partnering energy. Venus rules the sign of Libra, also rules Taurus. It rules our relationships, our values, our possessions, what makes us happy, what helps us to be creative, our skills and talents, our self-worth, and our self-value. But Venus, again, this helps. But right afterwards, it's going to oppose Neptune at, at 9:16 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then that's the day that Pluto stations direct. So that's going to be good because it is moving forward. But again, a lot of breakthroughs and revelations with all of this energy, and Mercury being in Scorpio and Mars being in Scorpio. They answer back to Pluto. So uncovering a lot of things in your own life, internally, about other people, about situations. Pluto will station direct at 10:54 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 1 degree and 22 minutes of Aquarius. And that is a big deal. And that moves us ahead. And Mars will remain in Scorpio through November 4th. So now we've got a powerful energy with Pluto, the two rulers of Scorpio, and by the 23rd, or the 22nd rather, the sun will be entering the sign of Scorpio, will be in Scorpio season. So there's a lot of intuitive energy, and you really want to trust your dreams, trust the messages that come through numbers and songs or license plates or however it is for you. Each of us has our ways of picking up on energy and people that are special to us, and the messages, however you get them, they'll be very, very strong now. And the dreams, the intuition, this is very manifesting energy. Mars and Scorpio will also be part of those grand trines, and Mercury is traveling with Mars, so getting to the bottom of things. And even if you could feel spaced out with Saturn in Pisces is hard to construct something. It can feel very hard to contain. Keep going with Mars and Scorpio. And on the 14th of October, Venus will trine Uranus at 10:10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's very innovative energy. Now Venus is having some fun. She's in Libra, where she loves to be. She's trining Uranus, which is part of that Uranus-Pluto trine, and she will trine Pluto later that day at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So there's a lot to look forward to, and next week has more levity. But again, this is an emotionally intense month, and with Saturn and Neptune, by the end of the month, they'll both be at the last degrees of Pisces. And then Uranus will return to the last degrees of Taurus on November 7th. So all of those outer planets have returned to their previous signs by early November. And then Saturn will station direct on the day of Thanksgiving, on the 27th, at 25 degrees of Pisces, which again is defaulting back to where Venus stationed direct and where the total lunar eclipse occurred on September 17th last year, and giving us, closure with what we've all been working with. What do you need to release? What dream are you trying to build when Saturn meets up with Neptune on February 20th of next year? And how are you releasing the things that are keeping you from dreams and innovation and magic with that magic triangle? And we're going to have several, and that begins next summer, and it's very exciting. So good luck, hang in there, and let's see what gets revealed with all of this. Take care.